Hey, what's up, my woods people? I'm Tyler Jones, and this is the Backcountry miniseries from the Element Podcast. Casey, fill them in.
Since we are diving headfirst into the backcountry hunting this season, we decided to call in some help and talk to some experts that know how to crush it in the backcountry.
So make sure and subscribe, and if this is helpful, we'd love for you guys to give us a 5-star rating and an iTunes review.
Absolutely. Now let's get into it because I still have a lot of Mountain House flavors to try before September gets here. On the show today, we've got Jess McGlothlin with OnX and Jess McGlothlin Media. What's going on, Jess?
Hey, guys. How's it going today?
It's going
Swell.
good. It's almost supper time, so we've got there's this thing that happens when you're really hungry, you hunt good, and I think that's also that with podcasting. The conversations go good because you're hungry and you're hyped up. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Totally. You got to keep it moving, and then there's a big reward at the end. That's the way to do it.
That's right. Cool. Well, apparently winter is not over where you're at. What's the deal with that?
No, I'm up in Missoula, Montana, and we're kind of overcast, and it's been snowing in the mountains, and I was out fishing this past weekend in northern Idaho, and it was in the 40s and rainy. So winter's still hanging on. I'm kind of ready for some nice warm weather like you guys must be having in Texas.
Yeah, it's 77 now, and that's the coolest day we've had in a while. So
I'm jealous, officially.
I got a really bad sunburn last week, so it's quite a contrast. And it sounds like that y'all are trying to fish summer steelhead in winter steelhead conditions, so that sounds pretty terrible.
Yeah, it's not the best, yeah.
Yeah. So speaking of fishing, I feel like I followed your career for a while. First heard about you actually on Tom Rosenbauer's podcast. He did an interview with you way back in the day, and that was real cool. But I feel like fishing has kind of helped mold who you are and what you do. So is that correct? Do you feel like fishing's taken you many places?
It has. It's been funny. When I first started out doing this, I never envisioned kind of being a fishing photographer and writer, and have been lucky enough to kind of have fallen into that niche. I grew up fishing, and turns out there was a need for some photography and some words in that industry.
Yeah.
It's taken me a lot of places that I absolutely would not have gone otherwise, which is kind of an oddly beautiful thing when you think about it.
I like that that wordage you use there too. Oddly beautiful. That's nice. And no, it's cool because the reason we really wanted to have you on the podcast is because you're going to bring a much different perspective than what a lot of just general old hunters are going to have, right? I mean, you've probably done a little hunting.
Just shoot it straight. 40-year-old male.
Yeah, right.
Hunting the Rockies,
yeah,
right?
Hunting the Rockies. That's what everybody does. But,
definitely.
I mean, you've done the backcountry thing, but in so many different forms than what's the standard. What do you think is the craziest backcountry experience you've had?
There have been a lot. I did a shoot a couple of years ago. Most of them are not in the U.S., which is kind of sad. I need to do more in my own backyard.
Yeah.
Did a shoot a couple of years ago in the Peruvian Amazon, where we were doing the first stand-up paddleboard expedition on some Amazon River tributaries. And it's in a region called the Madre de Dios, which is making headlines these days for its illegal gold mining and a bunch of deaths there, actually. A bunch of killings. So it was a bit of a sketchy float through the middle of the Amazon on the stand-up paddleboard. And we ran into the gold smugglers. We ran into the anti-narcotics crews from the Peruvian kind of national police force. So that felt like we were way out in the boonies, and then you'd see basically a SWAT team pop out of the middle of the jungle. So I have a feeling we weren't as backcountry as we felt. That was a bit of a wild one.
That is crazy.
But hey, with the right group of people, I was with a bunch of guys who were Peruvian whitewater athletes. So they were very good at what they did, and we all just kind of said, all right, this is going to be an adventure, and let's do it. Yeah. But very good for people. It's fun.
Well, it probably helped that you're with people who spoke the language, too. I feel like that for me, I've only been out of the country a few times, and, man, when there's a language barrier, it just makes it just to the nth degree more backcountry when you can't communicate,
Oh, it's so hard. It's one of my first international gigs was actually working a season up at the Panoi River in Russia. So it's north of the Arctic Circle, kind of a well-known salmon fishery. near Murmansk, and flew up and was kind of one of the only folks who spoke English in the camp. And it's a different experience, spending 6 months in a country where you don't speak the language. By the time I left, I could kind of tell a helicopter where to land, and I could curse pretty decently in Russian and probably play cards. But that was about it. And we'd get out of the camp was about 2.5 hours helicopter ride from the nearest city, and we'd get back in the city, and it's like, well, I can't order a sandwich. This is a problem. So it's funny. It's amazing what you can do, even not speaking the language, just by kind of making a fool of yourself and pantomiming. Body language goes a long way.
Oh, yeah, for sure. Sandwich you can usually probably make, like 2 hands and, I don't know, how
totally.
You signify like the bologna in between, but you can figure something out.
Totally. It worked out.
Yeah, no, when I spent a little time in Costa Rica, and it was kind of the same thing. Like,
awesome.
It was just like you're inundated, and it's amazing how much you can pick up on. Especially, it's a romantic language, so like you're going to have some roots and some things that kind of make a little sense even whenever you're an English speaker. But man, whenever you're forced to learn, like how to order ice cream pretty quick. Whenever it's hot and you're hungry. So
absolutely.
Do you feel like you spent more time where you're having to layer up, or where you're having to deal with like the heat and staying hydrated and stuff like that?
Oh, a lot of both.
Yeah.
I don't know really which I prefer at this point. I've got my travel system down pretty well for like saltwater shoots. It's hard on the body when you're out walking flats for 8 hours a day, every day for a week.
Yeah.
And then on the cold weather shoots, I've definitely kind of by just cause and effect learned how to layer up, and then a lot of stuff with the cameras, like how to keep camera batteries from getting sapped by the cold, and just kind of the silly tips and tricks with both. I think end of the day, I'd much prefer sweating, but there's only so many clothes you can take off in polite company too. You can always layer on more if it's cold, I guess.
Yeah.
So, good and bad to both.
Yeah, sure, but then you end up looking like an abominable snowman. That's or at least I do, because we were talking about earlier. We're from Texas, and man, that cold acclimation is just tough to deal with sometimes. But
it's hard, yeah.
So how do you keep a battery from zapping in the cold? Because I'm very interested in how that works.
Totally. I just stick it under my base layer. I wrap it up in like a buff or something that's going to insulate it. And if it's damp cold, I'll put it in like a buff and then in a Ziploc baggie to keep some condensation away, and just tuck it as close to skin as you can get. It's a pain when you need to change batteries out because you've kind of got to derobe a little bit. But it sure works. I'd rather do that and bring along a couple extra sets of batteries than bring along a dozen somewhere.
Well, how's that work as far as like a backcountry experience? Because, we were talking earlier, we're going on this wilderness elk hunt this fall, and pretty stoked about it, and we're definitely going to document the whole thing as well as we can. Filming's a big part of what we do. Yeah, thanks. Man, whenever the temperature starts dropping, or just in general, if you're back for 3 days plus, you're looking at pounds and pounds of batteries unless you find a way to do something different. Do you run a solar charger? Do you run like a battery bank? Or what do you do whenever you don't get to go back to a power source at night to recharge?
Totally. It depends. I usually travel with a solar charger, but sometimes you're in cold conditions and there's not a lot of sun for a few days. So ideally, solar charger combined with, I've got like a little Goal Zero battery bank that I'll bring along. And then usually run 3 to 4 sets of extra batteries per camera. So I laugh. I was packing up for a shoot the other day, and I had 80% of my gear was camera gear and fishing gear. And then it's like, well, I can wear the same clothes. No one's going to care. So the gear definitely takes precedence over everything else.
Yeah. So what are you shooting? What brand camera are you shooting?
I'm a Canon girl.
Okay.
And have been since the beginning. So I'll stick with them for a while, I think.
Yeah. I still shoot like all my stills on Canon pretty much, but we've moved to Sony for most of our video needs, which like the mirrorless cameras and the Sony line just do not have, they have the worst battery that you could ever imagine, pretty much. So
it's what I've heard, but they shoot so well. Everything I see coming off those cameras is gorgeous.
Yeah, it's awesome for sure, but it's hard when you grew up on Canon batteries because they're just so robust, you know.
They go and go. They're heavy. I've had a couple times, as you know, those cameras, you throw a long lens on there and it's like a weight. You feel like you're in the gym.
Oh, yeah.
But, you know, part of it, I guess.
Yeah.
I have some days trekking through different country where I'm just like, no, why did I ever choose to do this kind of work?
Yeah, but then you look up and you're like, oh, that's why. Look at that gorgeous mountain that no one gets to see, right?
Yeah.
Totally. Then you're just like, oh, yeah, this makes sense. But it's, I was up at a turkey camp a few weeks ago, and one day just left the cameras in camp and walked with a shotgun instead. And it was a nice change. You know, it's always a funny line between actually doing the activity and documenting it, I think.
Yeah, for sure. And, I mean, technically, you hunt all the time but you're just hunting an image, right? Or 10,000 that you sort through when you go home. But, so how does that translate? Like, do you have a hard time going, like, if you do want to transition over into the person who's fishing or hunting, do you have a hard time not thinking about framing and stuff while you're doing it?
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah.
It's hard, and I feel like I've been doing this 10 years now, I guess, professionally, and I'm finally reaching that point in my career where it's like, all right, some days camera stays home or it stays in camp, and I just need to kind of be at peace with that and actually enjoy what we're doing. But sure enough, I'll get way back up in the mountains and think, oh, damn, I wish I had my camera.
Yeah, sure.
So it's a balance. It's, you know, I still haven't figured it out yet. I think for fishing in particular, you can't do both.
Yeah.
I've got a shoot coming up here in a few weeks where it's actually a fishing tournament I'm competing in, but I'm also writing and shooting a story for a magazine. So it's like, well, I know I'm not going to be hardcore in the tournament because I'm going to be also working. So it's good and bad to it, I think.
Yeah, sure. And I mean, you used to work for Orvis, right? Did you work for them full time?
I did. Yeah, I worked for them full time for a couple of years, actually. Yeah, so it's learning experience for sure.
And they made you go through that frustration of wanting to fish and document the whole time, pretty much every day, I would imagine.
Totally. And they were really good. Orvis they'd send me out. I kind of ended up getting on their rounds. I represented them in a few fishing tournaments, and they're really good. Just like, hey, go fish. Don't worry about, shooting photos for us or doing anything. Just go rep the brand, which was a really fun spot to be in.
Yeah, for sure.
But same thing. You have a nice fish on, you're like, I wish I had that camera. You don't get rid of that feeling, I don't think.
I always used to feel like that when I brought a nice camera on a trip with me, I didn't catch a big fish, and then, vice versa. So
it's a weird thing there. I don't know. I always feel bad when I'm that photographer on like a commercial shoot, with a bunch of fishermen. It's, sure, shooting, you're not going to get into nice fish as soon as that camera's ready to go. But
you're like the banana in the boat whenever you show up with a Mark IV, right?
Yeah, it's just like, well, sorry guys, this is the way it is. Yeah. So it's just good measure of the anglers. Some people just be like, we'll get them regardless, and then other folks aren't as relaxed about it.
No, it's so true, and that kind of translates over to probably about near any adventure sport, if you want to call it that we do, hunting or winter sports or whatever. Like, if you can be the same person and be at the same skill level whenever there's, we say like you start filming, but in your case, stills a lot of times, it takes a different type of person, and that's not something that I come by naturally. Tyler's really great at the whole videography thing and being able to do those stuff, and I've grown up a hunter, and it hasn't been until we started doing stuff together that I really kind of started documenting things. And man, sometimes I find myself so often. Like, for example, this past deer season, we were up in the Midwest, and there was a buck that came over this ridgeline, and I'm the cameraman that day. But instead of throwing up the camera and getting footage, I throw up my binoculars to identify the deer and decide, try to be like I'm just such in hunter mode that it's so hard to transition over just to be in the the documentarian like that. I don't know. It's just a real hard tightrope to walk sometimes.
Absolutely. Have you guys found any kind of good middle ground there? I mean, I know I struggle with it every shoot. It's just like, I want to be participating, but then I'll miss the creative side.
Yeah. There's that for sure. I mean,
yeah.
I don't know that it's so hard to find that middle ground. I mean, like, I think you just have to kind of do what you were talking about earlier and just like start every once in a while, just not having a camera in the boat with you or whatever, wherever you might be. And just like, you won't be okay with it at first. And then eventually, like, you do it enough times, you're like, okay, that was nice to not have to mess with cameras and just to fish for once, you know. And as long as you're like still able to get your work done, I guess, then that's okay.
Yeah. Another thing
absolutely.
we do is we do a lot of the vlogging style stuff. And with that, you know, it's kind of more like the camera's just the third person and then our interaction is still on there. And we get to both kind of be hunter, even if one person's like shooting and the other person's still documenting. But at the same time, we kind of have a love for the the cinematic view of things and doing more film work as opposed to vlogs. And to do that, you know, you just kind of have to dedicate some time to it. And I don't know, a lot of times we set out to make a film and then it turns into a blog because we both are just so dedicated to, you know, having success or whatever. Another thing is we just don't get a lot of hook sets on film and then, you know, but you get the fight, right? So it's just,
you get the good stuff.
Yeah, for sure. So, okay. So one of the big things that I wanted to talk to you about is we talked to a lot of people about, you know, hunting in the backcountry or being back there, backpacking in and that sort of thing. And everybody always talks about layering and staying warm and this and that, but you spent so much time around the equator and you know, just in tropical locations. Where we're going on this hunt isn't going to be humid per se, but it's still going to be more like that arid desert Southwest.
Right.
And that's a whole nother dynamic that I don't feel like gets explored a lot, like as far as the whole staying cool and then trying to sleep when it's hot and that sort of thing. So you got any tips for that?
Absolutely. I've learned this the hard way through my career. Anymore when I'm going somewhere warm, it's sun protection.
Yeah.
Is the name of the game. I was definitely that person in my early 20s who's like, this is great. I'm in Belize on a shoot and I don't need sunscreen. I'm going to come home sunburned and looking cool. And I still fall back on that, but I definitely, I am 31. I'm like, oh, dang, I've got to start being smart about this. Mm-hmm. So I'm all about, like, you know, long sleeves, hoodies. A hoodie sun shirt is probably my most worn piece of equipment on any shoot in any environment.
Yeah.
They're good base layers for colder weather and then warm weather. I mean, you can just live in that thing.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Are you wearing gloves too?
On flat shoots, like saltwater flat shoots, I will. Mm-hmm. But it's hard. Often I'm running a couple cameras in the boat and then a camera in an underwater housing. And once your hands get wet, like once those gloves are wet, I don't necessarily want to pick up the camera not in the housing.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So I will, certainly if I'm fishing, I will. But I do when I can, I guess.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, good hoodie. I actually use a fair amount of merino wool, even in the hotter environments. Just if I'm in the same shirt for a number of days, it tends to get a bit less gnarly than the merino.
Yeah.
It's slower to dry. You know, it's a great performer. It's more comfortable to sleep in, but definitely the synthetics will dry faster. So, just clothing per environment, I guess. Yeah. You know, it's super different. Kind of doing what you guys are doing, like very dry environment versus like a hot, sticky saltwater environment. Mm-hmm. But yeah, it's basically protecting the skin. I've had instances on like saltwater shoots in the South Pacific where I've had feet get cut by coral and get infected. You know, there's so much stuff in those environments. You think, oh, it's not the jungle. There's not much stuff here that can cause problems. And then you get a cut or something, and there's some pretty gnarly infections that can come on really quick.
Yeah.
So just making sure. Oh, go ahead.
So what is your what do you typically have as far as first aid goes on a trip?
You know, I've cobbled together kind of my own big first aid kit. I probably travel with way too much. Anything from like kind of the mini suture strips that you can piece together to quick clot, you know, and all the bandaging supplies and antibiotic supplies. it started off smaller over the years. It's certainly grown as I've like spent time in different hospitals around the world in third world countries. And, you know, I carry my own actual suture kit too with needles, because often third world countries reuse needles, you know, so it's little stuff like that where it's like, I'd rather have my own supplies than know that I can take care of myself or someone else. And I have yet to go on a shoot ever really in the US or abroad where I've not used the first aid kit. So I carry it just in like a little dry bag, you know, with me, so I can clip it to like a ring in the boat or something. It's always around, but handy to have for sure. For
sure. So, you know, speaking of dry bags, I'm sure doing as much shooting of fishing over the years that you've done, there is some kind of waterproof element, some kind of system you have that allows you to keep all your stuff protected from the water elements, I guess. So what does that look like?
Absolutely. I'm a big fan of Pelican cases. You know, from the boat, I roll around with a couple Pelican cases. I think they're the 1510s, the little ones with the wheels on them.
Yeah.
And then I have a kind of ghetto old Patagonia backpack, waterproof backpack with a roll top that I pirated a insert from a boat bag and put it in there. And it actually kind of is a nice little camera divider in this bag.
Oh, that's cool.
And it's fun. I think the bag now, I've had it for like 12 years. It's stupidly old, but it's my favorite thing because I can put stuff in there, and because it's roll top, there aren't many zippers. So even traveling, if I'm not in somewhere where it's super wet, but I'm somewhere with like bad pickpockets, it's a really good way to deter pickpockets because they have to actually like physically unroll the bag to get in there.
Ah, sneaky.
It's good thinking.
Yeah, it works out. It's actually saved my rear end a few times. So it's kind of handy.
Yeah, I hate for your first aid kit to get stolen in a third world country by a pickpocket, and then you got to use somebody's needle. Ugh, it's bad.
I'm going to be in trouble in that case.
Yeah.
But yeah, I'm a big fan of any new bags that I get, and I have like a big old Patagonia duffel that I roll around with. Any new bags that come to my household immediately get beat up and like covered with duct tape, and I hate traveling with gear that looks new because that's a sure sign that someone's gonna like, oh, that's an expensive bag, I want to steal it.
Yeah.
So I've been known to actually like drag duffel bags behind cars down dirt roads and do some pretty stupid stuff, but knock on wood, I have yet to lose a bag.
Your neighbors are probably like,
working.
This girl's crazy.
What's happening? Yeah, pretty much.
It's a good thing she's gone a lot, or we wouldn't be living here anymore.
Totally. They'd be concerned, I feel like.
That's funny. So, you know, what you're talking about there, like with the Pelican cases and stuff, that all, I mean, I know the protection is there. I've used, you know, a couple Pelican cases too, but it all sounds real heavy. What do you do when you got to, like, cut weight and, you know, spend a little time, you know, with maybe camp on your back and stuff? What are you doing when you got to ditch those heavy cases and whatnot?
Ditching heavy cases, I've got a big old F-Stop is the brand, an F-Stop camera bag that I use. It's basically a backpacking backpack with like an internal, they call it an internal camera unit, I think.
That's cool.
And it's solid. It's a pain in the butt. It's a big bag, but because it's built on a backpacking pack frame, you can load it and it's actually pretty comfy.
Yeah.
And so I'll throw the camera gear in there, and those are definitely the shoots. Like I said, I'll have, you know, camera gear, camping gear, and then maybe one change of clothes. The clothing always comes last, but I can fit. I've done a week in the backcountry with that bag and camera gear and felt pretty decent with it.
That's cool. Yeah, I always wanted one of those F-Stop bags because I don't know, even like just day packing sometimes with camera gear, like there's not like most bags, camera bags don't have, like they've got the things you need, the dividers and everything, little pockets for batteries and whatever, but like they don't have any room for a light jacket that you can put on when you're not hiking or whatever, you know. So like I always wanted one of those F-Stops. I never ponied up for it though.
I could totally see like you could like put a foot-long Subway sandwich in one of those little, you know, say like you're gonna leave the Canon 70 to 200 at home and put a sandwich in there. Like all those dividers would come in real handy.
Yeah,
it would be good.
They're pretty handy. Yeah, and honestly, it's for years before I got that bag, I had like an old external frame backpacking bag, and would just kind of pad cameras in clothing and put them in a dry bag in case it rained. So I think that's the beautiful thing about photography. I was just talking with someone about this last week, is as much as we talk about gear, and certainly as professionals, it's important to our paychecks. At the end of the day, you can get someone with like a little DSLR and tell them, hey, throw in a dry bag and go hike for 3 days that direction.
Mm-hmm.
And they're still going to probably come out with some pretty rad pictures.
Oh, yeah. I got a buddy that was in Africa for the last year or so, and he had just a Canon T7i and just a prime lens, and got some really just beautiful shots of the people and elephants and everything over there, and
that's awesome.
Yeah, it's just crazy. I mean, it's really, and he actually said this several years ago to me, but like you can't, or I guess if you go to beautiful places, you're going to get beautiful footage, in the video world, I guess, but stills for people like you. And it's like you said, like go hike for 3 days, go somewhere that not many people go, and you'll get a picture that not many people have seen, right?
Absolutely. And that's, I think the beauty of it too, is you just go. I mean, there's so much stuff to capture in our everyday, but it's always a challenge to just be like, hey, go somewhere and find a story to tell. You don't have time to do your homework, and you just are going into something totally new, which it's scary all at once. It's like, hey, I don't know what my angle is going to be for this piece. Who am I going to meet and what stories are there going to be?
Mm-hmm.
But then the good stuff happens,
Yeah, totally. I mean, we try to storyboard a lot before we go on a trip and talk about how things are going to go. But honestly, it never really goes to plan, and maybe that's because we're not good storyboarders. I don't know. But I mean, you can't script like, okay, the whitetail's going to come from the left. It's just not going to happen.
Yeah.
So, in my opinion, Tyler likes the storyboard thing more than I do. I like to fly by the seat of my pants, but a lot of times we end up with not all the footage we need. But in my opinion, like the stories that you don't try to facilitate, but you let happen to you, those are the ones that are they're the most moving. They don't always happen, though, so I think that's where the storyboard has to be there some. Because honestly, I can't tell you how many times we go on a trip and, like, nothing really happens. So, or you get to where, like, it all culminates, you're like, oh, crap, we don't have any way to start this thing at all. It happened.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, but...
Well, and that's a really good point, too, is I think a lot of folks see the work of an outdoor creative and think it's awesome all the time, and it's these grand adventures all the time. And you guys know how it is. There's a lot of times like sitting on airplanes or driving in the car and just doing that day-to-day stuff that far outweighs like the glory moments of everything.
Yeah,
really.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, I watched. I bought the first Planet Earth series when it came out, and
nice.
So I was watching them the other day again, watching one of them. And I can't remember the cameraman's name, but he's famous now, especially after this. But like, he spent like a month straight in like this tiny little like carved out like dugout on the side of a mountain over in the Middle East, trying to capture footage of a snow leopard, and like missed Christmas and New Year's and everything, all those holidays right there with his family. he's out there by himself, and he gets this footage of a snow leopard chasing like a sheep down the hill, and now he's famous. But like, that's the stuff that like you watch Planet Earth, and if you don't watch the behind the scenes stuff, you don't know that it took 30 days to get that one clip of that snow leopard, and how like mundane that must be to sit there like that all day,
Yeah. Oh, totally. And like you said, people just don't think of it that way. It's hard to imagine this much work went into the creative. Yeah. And then you get those days where, like, it just happens. I feel there are definitely those magic moments where you're just like, I can't believe I'm seeing this and I'm actually here to witness this. So it's a mix of both, I guess.
Yeah. And that's definitely, why you do it. And it's cool to watch someone who's great at their craft, like what you do, where many people experience awesome things all the time. But if they just whip out a cell phone or a camera that they don't know how to work and just take a picture on auto, like it just doesn't convey like what a true photographer or videographer can do. I just think about sunsets all the time. Like how many lame-o, well, I don't mean to be so negative. How many subpar sunset pictures do you see, on a hashtag on Instagram, right? And it's like, and that like, the way that was painted is so much more vivid because you've seen sunsets too, but it takes a certain in a certain, I guess, want to have a skill level to actually make shots come through and convey the moment. I mean, I guess as a photographer, you can probably describe this better than I can. So I don't mean to put words in your mouth, but I always feel like whenever I'm videoing something, like I'm trying to convey senses that you can't get by just looking at something. You know what I'm saying? Like I'm hoping that by this video you're able to smell or taste or whatever is going on because of something that's deep back in your memory. And
I love that. Yeah.
Well, I don't think I do it very often, do a good job, but it's what's on my mind at least, and that's the thought that counts, I suppose. So I don't know.
No, I think that's the whole point of what we do. Really, is there's this weird not escapism, but kind of escapism. Okay, yeah. We're helping people get away from probably realistically sitting at a desk somewhere, and they on the weekend go and hunt or go and fish, and they dream of doing a cool backcountry hunt. So we're kind of, I don't know, not to over glorify or overthink it, but it's a fun kind of just mental break, I hope, for people.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah, sure. That's absolutely right, man. So, one thing, you mentioned earlier is that you had cut your foot on coral. And so this may not be a great question for you, but we're interested in, I'm interested personally in trail runner shoes. Because totally. I have super narrow feet, and I don't know how to I don't know anything about getting the right fit with a boot. And I have some really nice boots that I've taken on several trips and have never I've never really just worn a hole in my foot necessarily, but it's been hot a few times, and I haven't probably ever gone through some of the stuff that maybe a sheep hunter would normally go through or whatever, so in these boots. So I'm just so interested in the footwear side of things with these people that we're interviewing for this series. And like I said, you may or may not be a good person for this question, but I'm going to ask you, boots, trail runners, Crocs, what are you wearing?
Yeah, no, it makes me so happy. So long ago, before I did this professionally, I actually sold footwear in Sportsman's Warehouse for years.
Cool.
So footwear is, and I'll admit to it, when I'm meeting people for the first time, I totally check out their shoes and judge. I form an initial opinion on footwear, which is super immature, and I'll own up to it, like I said. But that's my I judge people off their shoes. So there we go. But it depends. For me personally, it depends on the project. I'll always have a pair of flip-flops in the bag as camp shoes or travel shoes. And then I wear a ton of Salomon. Salomon trail runners are kind of my go-to. You can throw a pair of gaiters on them, you know, if you're in the backcountry for a few days. And they're solid. I've had them everywhere from, Montana to Japan but I wore at a shoot in the Middle East last year and wore those literally every day.
Yeah.
So they're solid.
I actually have a pair of those. I think it's the XDA Gore-Tex ones or whatever they are. I don't know, but they've been really good for me. They kind of, I don't know. I tried to wear them in the Elkwoods one year, and I don't know if it was a fit thing or what, but I actually ended up getting a really weird thing on my heel from them. But I think it was just maybe they weren't designed to do what I was trying to do in them, and that was me mistreating the shoe more than anything. But ever since then, I wear them anytime I'm just doing a easy trail thing, or I actually wear them as work shoes a lot. I do construction for a living, and they're they're not steel toe, but man, they're full coverage. You're not going to kick a board and hurt your toe,
Totally.
I'm not an open-toed shoe guy. When I know that you okay, don't judge me, right? But I ain't wearing flip-flops, girl.
Go for it.
I can't do it. When you say, and I know that you're a pro and you know what you're doing, but when you say flip-flops, I'm oh, what happens if she kicks a rock and breaks her toenail?
Totally. And I it's happened. I tell you that one shoot where I came back, so I was in the one where I had the coral cuts. It was a shoot down in the South Pacific, French Polynesia, for Costa del Mar. It was a pretty hefty project. It was one where I felt pressure, all right, don't screw this one up.
Yeah.
And pulled a total stupid newbie mistake. I bought a pair of new saltwater wading boots, And there's like a model I'd had before about the same size and didn't try them on. And it turned out the size had been mislabeled on the shoes.
Oh, no.
So I was down like 2 sizes from what I normally was going to have. And so they, of course, like got ripped up on the coral and didn't do a very good job of doing what they were doing. So I was that person wandering through like the saltwater flats of French Polynesia the last few days of the shoot with socks for sun protection and then like Teva sandals strapped over that.
Oh my goodness.
Really not a good look.
People were judging you for sure. They're like,
there was so much judgment.
This girl been looking at my feet. I'm looking at hers now.
I know. There were some of the little local kids who were just like, what is happening here? But it was funny. And then coming on the way home, I was that person, my feet eventually swelled up so much I couldn't fit them into my flip-flops that I travel with. And so I was that person walking barefoot through like LAX, holding my shoes, which is just not a good look.
It's worse than a third world needle, I think.
Yeah, I know. It's just like, this is not going to happen well. And it was funny. I think when you have a shoot that you guys know how it is, you feel like, all right, stuff went well and I'm happy with what we got. You just kind of feel like nothing can get to you. I was like, I'm barefoot. I don't care. Things are good. Life was great. It's just a funny kind of impenetrable feeling with that.
For sure. So speaking of walking around, do you ever use trekking poles for any instance?
I have. I need to more. Definitely like backpacking, in any kind of backcountry trip, 100% we'll use them. For whatever reason, I tend to be kind of unbalanced with big packs. And anything that gives me essentially another couple legs, I'm all about it. Gotcha.
Well, kind of moving on here, what about like your sleeping situation? Because this is something that, for me, I have some old injuries and like a mid-back injury. And so it's like a huge deal for me to... like I've spent some time backcountry, and I tend to wake up if I'm sleeping. If it's not like a horse camp, and we've got sleeping pads. If I'm sleeping on the ground, I tend to wake up like almost can't move, and it's not like it's. I don't know. It'll work itself out usually. 15 minutes in, but I almost can't like raise up. So it's a big deal to me to kind of pick everybody's brain on this and try to figure out what the most comfortable situation is.
Absolutely. Yeah, that makes for a rough morning. Even if it does work out, that's not what you want to wake up to.
No.
Yeah.
Dang.
And Tyler's not a coffee drinker, so he doesn't even get that that boost,
Oh, I couldn't function without the coffee. I don't know how you do it. And this is something too that I'm still working on finding my ideal system. I feel like it's gotten a lot better over the years. I use Thermarest products mostly.
Okay.
Because they pack down. Usually I'm flying with stuff and then having to trek it in once I'm on location. I've got a pad. I think it's there. Shoot, I was just on it this weekend. I think it's the Neo Air Light Max or something, but it folds up to like the size of a Nalgene, a little bit smaller, and is a pretty fluffy pad. It's got an auto-inflating kind of opening on one end, which seems really counterintuitive. You kind of blow into this open hole, and it forms some kind of vacuum in the pad, so it like helps inflate itself, which I had never seen before. And I saw it the first time when Thermarest sent me this pad, and I was just like, no, this isn't good. It's gimmicky. It felt gimmicky. And it actually works. I'm not that person at altitude anymore being like, oh, I'm going to pass out because I just blew up my pad. It's pretty fun.
Yeah.
And then just pair that with I have a 20-degree down bag that I love, which has that hydrophobic down, like the treated down in it. And it's a solid bag. The two pieces fold together really small and actually pretty decent night's sleep, which is nice.
Cool.
Yeah.
I think I have a Neo Air. I know I have a Thermarest pad, and it's like orange. But I don't know. Like it doesn't fold up quite that small. It's like a little bigger than an Nalgene.
Well, you might have said Neo Air Light or something like that, didn't you?
Probably.
They have so many different. I need to get on their website and just look now. They have so many different ones. It's crazy.
Yeah. Mine's also an extra long, so like it's going to be probably a little bit bigger than most people's.
totally. I bet it's comfy though.
Oh, it is. Yeah, nice. It's got a pretty good R value, and it's very comfortable. But like, I weigh enough that like if I'm not like necessarily a side sleeper, but I do end up there at some point during the night, and I will feel the ground through it most of the time. So,
totally.
You bringing a pillow, or do you just ball up some clothes or whatever?
Just ball up clothes.
Yeah.
I'm old school. Actually, I finally broke down and bought like the nice inflatable pillow, and I'll use it for close stuff. But I don't know. It's one less thing I have to pack. Really.
Yeah, sure.
It's just silly.
No, I'm kind of teetering on that thing. It's like one less thing to pack, but as a hunter, I kind of think of the multi-use of a pillow where like I could sit on it some too while we're out doing stuff. So I'm always kind of weighing like, okay, so. Separate side of my life, I really love to cook. Okay, so I don't know if you've ever watched Good Eats with Alton Brown, but
yes, it's amazing.
It's the best show ever. And
is this similar to what you do?
Yes. Me and Alton, we're like on the same wavelength here, but no. But he's always talking about in the kitchen, you can't have unitaskers. You got to have multitaskers, and I think that's like great knowledge for the backcountry. Like maybe you are bringing in a little extra weight here, but if you can also use it for something else, it might pay off in the long run. So I don't know.
That's a really good point.
Yeah.
No, I appreciate that. That's a really good point.
Well, I'm not telling you to change your system because you do it way more than I do, but I'm just saying that's just kind of where my thoughts at.
That's what's fun about this whole thing is like I'm always learning so much from other folks. I want to be like the 85-year-old, hopefully, who's still doing this and learning new stuff every day.
Oh, that's cool.
So,
that's what it takes to stay good, and that's that's going to be what benefits you. Just we talk about this a lot, but man, a lot of people try to make a living being experts, and for one, that doesn't sound like any fun, and two, like who really is an expert? There's some people who do something really well, but there's always so many variables that things can change at any moment, and what you thought you knew, you don't know anymore. And if you're too pompous or proud, and you don't have the humility to change and learn, then you're just going to become stagnant at some point in time.
Totally. And honestly, there's hardly anything in life more fun than being like, I'm a newbie, teach me.
Yeah.
I've had so much fun doing that at OnX, and I roll at OnX. I grew up, very deep in the fly fishing industry and had, I'm from Montana, grew up with guns and played around with stuff, but was never a super hardcore hunter. And anymore, I'll just tell the guys at OnX, hey, can I buy you a beer and let's go teach me about hunting. And it's the best thing to do because those guys are just such a wealth of knowledge. And it's really fun. You don't pretend to know anything.
Yeah.
Like, hey, think of me as like a preschooler and teach me stuff. And it's awesome. I love it.
That's cool. Just do the beer buying after the firearm experience, not before. Just
Absolutely.
PSA
for sure. You got to get it in the right order.
Yeah, that's right.
That's right.
So you have a down bag. Do you wear down jackets at all? Do you bring one to just in case you're gonna, say you're around Montana, and any time there could be some kind of little storm pop up and it get pretty chilly on the mountain. Do you have that? What do you carry, I guess?
I carry a synthetic. I think it's an 13-year-old synthetic jacket that I have. It's ancient and literally duct taped together, but I love it, so I won't give it up.
Just as I ain't broke, don't fix it kind of person.
Yeah.
Totally. I know duct tape is the best thing ever. But I like the synthetic jackets. I have a down jacket, but traveling, it's almost always synthetic because, if you get wet, you're still going to be warm.
Yeah.
And definitely, I always end up being that person who's sticking my arm under a log in the river trying to save a fly that I got stuck on a log. So it's the synthetics dry out a bit.
The self-employment life has been tough on you, hasn't it?
No, and it's so funny. I was telling someone the story the other day. When I first got my first camera, I actually bought it here in Missoula 10 years ago and have traveled a lot of miles since then and somehow found my way back here. But I was working 3 jobs and literally ate, I think, beans and rice for a month so I could put away some money to get a camera. And luckily I'm not at that stage anymore, but I still cling to those ways of well, if I don't need to spend the money, why should I?
Yeah.
Which is kind of, I don't mind living that way. I think it lets you focus, like decluttering life lets you focus on the important stuff.
For sure.
Oh, yeah.
Love it. That's awesome. And, just a kind of a side note, I don't mean to take away from that, but like I don't feel like that a lot of people might listen to this and be jealous of your lifestyle. But there are a lot of people out there that don't make the sacrifices that it would take to do or to be where you're at today. You know what I mean? So
yeah,
kudos to you for eating beans and rice for a month.
Well, it's you guys know how it is. Like, social media is a weird vehicle right now because I think people see a certain side of life.
Oh yeah.
And I try and, as much as I can, be pretty honest on social and just, first of all, I'm not posting a ton of pictures of myself because I want to tell other people's stories. But it's like, hey, I'm on a plane for 72 hours traveling around the world. Here we are. We need to talk about those kind of non-glamorous sides of this. Mm-hmm. Because I don't know that it's doing the outdoor industry a lot of good to see kind of the Instagram famous folks who just post like a really curated version of this. And you guys do a really good job of just saying, hey, here we are out today, weather's crap, but we're having fun. It's just, you keep it real, which makes me really enjoy following what you guys do.
Thanks.
Good job with that.
Thanks, Jess. I think sometimes it's just we're not very good at social media, and that's why it seems that way.
So hard. If I didn't have to do it for business, I would be off social media.
Oh, me too.
Yeah.
Me too.
It would definitely look a lot different. I would probably follow like 15 people as opposed to, however many or whatever. Because
totally.
I don't know.
Yeah.
Here lately, and Tyler's kind of taught me this, like, man, unfollowing people can sometimes be one of the best things you ever do, because just some people just, like, there's no reason to let, this is just going off on a tangent, and I sound like a drama queen, but there's no reason to let somebody, like, ruin your day, online, you know what I mean? Like, it's so dumb. Like, just, I don't know, follow some cool photographers and just be done with it.
That's right.
Yeah.
No, and it's funny you say that, like, being real on social, like, and that's something that I always look forward to your stories in particular. Like, don't get me wrong, your Insta page is great, but your stories are fun because, like, you tell exactly what you're doing all the time. And you're a coffee drinker, and I am too. And like I said, I don't get that with Tyler. Like, here's the thing. Okay, we were going to hunting camp this past turkey season, and I sent a text message in our group like, hey, is there a coffee maker? And then Tyler's like shaking his head over. I'm like, this is important, okay? You don't understand. Yeah. It's like part of the comfort, right? But so when you're doing a backcountry thing, and we'll expand this into food and drink and everything, but like in particular coffee, like what's your solution? Because I know you pretty much got to have it every day, right?
I pretty much I try to cycle off. I didn't drink coffee until my mid-20s when I was working at that job in Russia. And then I was getting so little sleep, I was like, okay, coffee's a thing.
Ooh.
And luckily I learned to drink the Folgers pre-dried instant stuff. So right now any coffee is good coffee.
Yeah.
But I do like the sticks. I've worked with a couple different brands before, use the Starbucks sticks, Via, I think they're called.
Yeah.
And there's a couple other like outdoor industry instant coffee stick brands that are easy. I was actually out fishing, did an overnight fishing with a friend this past weekend. And second day we woke up and it was like cold and rainy and awful. And we had packed in like, little jet boil and we're making coffee and had a border collie with us who of course saw something that she had to go herd and sideswipe the coffee. And our nicely boiled and I brought legit coffee grounds, that were fresh, like ground, and we're going to have good coffee. And the coffee was gone. The dogs totally ran into the coffee. It's all over the floor. And then we did the instant sticks, which we had in reserve.
Yeah.
So it was all right. But I'm definitely getting into the stage now where if it's a couple-day trip, I'll pre-grind some coffee and then just do, camp coffee, boil water and pull the grounds in there.
Yeah.
And let them do their thing. I had this shoot in the Middle East I did last year. We did the Arabic coffee where they basically do that same thing and then add in cardamom and a bunch of different herbs and they sweeten it super strong. But some of the Bedouin tribes do it less sweet. And it's been fun to experiment with adding in kind of odds and ends because it doesn't add weight, but it can be kind of a special thing at camp to have cardamom coffee or something different.
Yeah.
It sounds fun. I mean, it does. And both my parents are big time coffee drinkers, and I don't know if that had anything to do with why I do or don't. But I do know that the smell of my dad's coffee brings back just like I feel like I'm 9 years old again and we're in the deer stand, like it's just one of those things that like is so nostalgic for me. But yeah, I think by the time coffee was something that like I thought about as like, hey, this will help me get up, I was like, okay, well, I think I'm just going to be tough and just try to forego, anything that might help me or might get me hooked, you know what I mean? So I just anyway, I don't know.
Will you do tea or anything? Do you enjoy tea?
I'm not even a big tea drinker. I mean, I'll drink some every once in a while. I mean, I like to have some caffeine at some point every once in a while if I get pretty pretty worn down or whatever.
Oh, don't let him lie to you. He's the dude who we're on a turkey trip. He's like, hey, I need to go town and get a Coke. And like, oh, come on, man.
But that's in like a 3-day trip. I have one Coke,
That's
know.
True,
so
that's true. And it was like probably a good time to go do that anyways because we were kind of worn out. So,
we were getting tired.
Fair. Yeah.
So I mean, I'll drink caffeine here and there, but yeah, it's just not like it's something that. I don't know. I just try not to be dependent on things. And so at any time, like I'm liable to stop doing something for 2 weeks just to prove to myself that like I'm stronger than that is. You know what I mean?
That's actually really smart. Yeah. Kudos to you for that.
Yeah. I think I'm going to stick where we're at and be good with it. I know I could if I needed to, right?
My one weakness is cereal, which I don't get in the backcountry, but
oh, interesting.
I love cereal. I can eat it 3 times a day, It's just one of my things.
Certain kind of cereal or just all cereal?
I'll eat anything. I really prefer the less sugary ones, just I don't know. I mean, there's some pretty sugary ones that are good too, but yeah, I like Special K and that kind of thing, a little bit of honey bunches of oats, that kind of thing.
So. Have you had Reese's peanut butter puffs?
I have. I do not like them.
Oh my
gosh. Not like them.
Oh, I just love drinking that leftover milk. Anyways, that's totally not backcountry. Sorry.
Yeah, but food is backcountry, right? We got to have food in the backcountry. So like, is it Mountain House a lot of times for you, or is it something different?
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, it's Mountain House, and actually, my go-to backcountry meal is like an Epic bar, kind of the jerky bars.
Okay.
And then coconut butter. I can get coconut butter. You know how the peanut butter you can get in the little individual squeeze packs?
Yeah.
I get coconut butter like that, and that's kind of my go-to is have coconut butter in a Epic bar, and then I'm fired up and ready to roll.
What's the nutritional values of coconut butter? Like I don't think I've ever heard of that. I don't guess.
Totally. So it's like a healthy fat. It's like coconut oil with some of the ground meat from the coconut.
Okay.
And it's when I'm home, I try and do like the keto thing, so super high healthy fats and then moderate protein and low carb, just because that's how I function best. My brain likes that. And it's hard to do in the backcountry. Often traveling, it's like, hey, I'll eat what's around. But certainly when I'm packing my own food, I try and stick to that as much as I can.
Cool.
And that's a meal like in bear country. That's a pretty low stint meal, which is nice.
Yep.
They're not used to feeding on coconuts up there. Right?
Totally. It's a foreign concept. The jerky might catch some attention, but coconuts, I feel like I'm pretty safe.
That's funny. So what's your go-to house flavor?
Oh, God, I don't know. There's so many. And like the chicken teriyaki is pretty hard to beat. I'm not picky, to be honest. Luckily, I think it's traveling to all these different foreign countries where I'm just like, I'll try anything once.
Yeah, I'm kind of similar.
There's been a lot of weird food in the past, so.
That's cool. I'm actually a foodie. Like I mean, I won't eat anything. I'll try a lot of things, and like I don't know, some things kind of wig me out, but you can, it's pretty raw at that point. But like, I would love to have traveled like you have, and just to be able to experience some like legit food, because I know how much I love traditional Mexican food, and I can only imagine just going to the Middle East or wherever and just having to experience that. That'd be cool.
It's fun. What's your favorite? If you can have any cuisine, would it be like traditional Mexican, or what's your favorite?
Oh man, that's like, I'll say this.
Question.
Okay, so first thing out of the backcountry, you really can't beat a cheeburger, I don't think. You know what I mean? Like
True.
Good greasy cheeseburger, if you've been in the backcountry for several days, like it's just can't beat it. But we've got, like, in my hometown here, which is like 1,200, 1,300 people, I think. we've got some fine Mexican restaurants, like a couple or three of them that are just like top notch. They can take your order, but they can't really speak the English back to you, kind of thing. And it's
totally.
I mean, it's hard to beat. I don't know. I feel super blessed just to be where I'm at.
Oh, I know it. And like we've got both, like the good Tex-Mex, and then also like some more traditional, like south of the border kind of stuff. You know, so we can kind of mix both of those together. Man, it's good.
Yeah.
But Tyler. He goes on and on about, what was it, Ethiopian restaurant, or what was that one that?
Oh, Mediterranean stuff. Yeah, like Heroes and that kind of thing.
What was that thing in Tulsa that you were eating?
Yeah. Oh, that was India Palace in Tulsa. Yeah, it's like if you're ever in Tulsa for any reason, that's a spot, man. A bunch of
really.
Oh yeah,
nice.
It's like in a corner of a strip mall. So I mean, I like Indian food a lot. I like Mediterranean stuff as well. I toured in a band or two different bands for like almost 10 years, and so we got to travel mostly regionally, but
nice.
over the U.S. So I got to definitely experience some different stuff like that. And like the main thing I had to do was talk my bandmates out of like going to Texas Roadhouse. You know, it's like
right.
we're in a like a whole different part of the U.S. Let's try to see what's like famous around here, hole in the wall, you know, kind of thing. So
totally. I bet you saw some fun stuff on the road.
Oh,
that
yeah.
Sounds like fun.
Yeah, it's definitely some crazy stuff. Yeah. But
that's awesome.
Anyway, so to kind of like, of course, this kind of goes along with the food side of things, but like water purification, how are you handling that most of the time?
Totally. I've gone back and forth. So I've done the Giardia thing twice, and at this point I'm pretty picky with my water purification.
Yeah.
I use MSR. Their systems I'm really happy with. Any of their in-camp systems I've had really good luck with.
So is that like a pump, or I don't guess I know when you're talking about system there?
Yeah, they have. I think the one I have is like the Mini Works maybe, but it's basically like a pump.
Okay.
And so you can fill bottles and storage bags pretty quickly. And I've actually gone. Last year, I guess, after getting Giardia again, I was like, all right, I'm going to do a deep dive into the different water filtration systems and like what actually purifies what. I was getting ready to go to Kenya on a shoot and knew that we'd be like basically filtering puddles, so I didn't want to mess around with those. And MSR, like they actually have a lab that they dedicate to bettering their water purification, which was pretty cool. And I came away from kind of that self-study being like, all right, I'm not going to get sick drinking from this thing, and have had really good luck with it.
Yeah.
So I'm definitely picky. That being said, I was on a shoot in Sweden last year where it was like we just drink out of the river and no one got sick. So it depends on where you are too.
It's cool. So my brother-in-law actually, I think they're like pH testers or something you can buy off of Amazon. I don't know exactly what they're, but some kind of tester for water. And you can test like, you can't tell like what's in your water, but you can tell that it has a certain amount of things outside of water actually in it. You know what I mean? And
totally.
like, different kind of chemicals or whatever it might be in there. And so he's been testing a lot of water and like running it through filters and stuff. And he actually said that the water from Kroger is the only one he's found that has like zero anything but water in it.
Huh.
Even filtered stuff out of his sink. So I didn't know if it'd be interesting to see how to test those on like MSR type stuff, and then whoever else,
totally.
just kind of do a test on that kind of thing.
Man, it would be kind of scary to test the water at your house, like faucet water.
Oh, I know.
I wouldn't want to do it, I don't think. It's like doing that genetic testing thing to see what diseases you're apt to get.
Yeah.
Like, I don't know about that.
Yeah.
Just take whatever happens, right?
Yeah.
Totally. Yeah. No, I grew up on a horse boarding and training facility in Montana. And I remember at one point we all, we had like automatic water systems, but all hooked up to the well for the horses. Mm-hmm. And we all kind of started getting sick, and we ended up doing the test, and, sure enough, a horse had pooped in the water system. And it, being a well, it kind of all mixes in there. It's like, well, yeah, you don't really realize what's in your water until it's making you sick.
It's crazy.
So,
it's crazy.
Goodness gracious.
So what about like, have you ever been in I don't know how this works because I've never done this, but like in a saltwater situation, can you, like when you filter that, does it filter the salt out?
It doesn't. I think I don't know how portable they get. There are like desalinators I think is what they're. I should know more about the science than I don't. But honestly, I just bring along like some kind of purification system, and typically when you get back to the camp or wherever, you at least have some kind of clean water that you can then filter and use.
Gotcha.
And anymore, we're in such a weird time in society. Anymore, you can like buy a pallet of water and usually have it brought in with you.
Really?
Bottled water. Yeah, it's like bring it. I always try and travel with like a empty duffel bag, and I've gone in like, you'll land in a foreign country in an airport. I'll go and buy like a case or a couple cases of water, throw them in the duffel, and then for whatever in-country transit we have, I just have another bag full of water.
Mm-hmm. Oh, that's cool.
It's not I wouldn't recommend it. It's not a great way to do it. And definitely like getting on helicopters or planes, people would look at you like, what the hell do you have in this bag?
Probably weighs 60 pounds, right?
Right. Oh, yeah. But at some point, like water's water. And especially on those saltwater trips, I mean, you're sweating so much. Whenever I get back to camp at night, I'll do like a bottle of plain water, a bottle with water with like a Noon electrolyte tablet in it, just to kind of replenish, and then another bottle of plain water. And that's like before I eat. I usually do it when I'm cleaning camera gear. Before I can kind of do anything else, I just make sure to replenish. And it's amazing how much better you feel after just getting electrolytes on.
Yeah, sure. You're dedicated if you're going to clean camera gear before you eat. I know that is not my priorities.
I've definitely learned about myself. Like when I'm traveling and I hit a wall of exhaustion, I become non-functional. So I've learned over the years, like, get the important stuff done. Worst case scenario, I go to bed without dinner. But if my camera gear is not ready to go in the morning when the client is, then I'm kind of screwed. So
that's the ultimate keto right there. Just don't eat.
There you go. Yeah, intermittent fasting. Yeah.
Yes.
Oh man. So do you run a Nalgene or like a bladder and a hose?
Usually Nalgene. Bladder and a hose. Sometimes it always makes me nervous having a bladder in the same bag as camera gear.
Yeah.
And if I do that, I'll do like a bladder and put the bladder within another dry bag, just so in case at least it's doubly protected. But honestly, usually Nalgene, especially if we're out on the flats, like waiting without a boat, anytime I unbuckle my bag, I think that ups the risk of like it falling in the water open somehow. I just am. I like to have my bag buttoned up tight as much as possible. It becomes kind of an odds thing of like the less I mess with that backpack when I'm standing rib deep in water, the less something has a chance of getting ruined.
Yeah, no kidding. It's a scary deal. Last spring, Tyler and I went on a little adventure to the hill country here in Texas and went fishing, and I got into fishing mode, of course, and had my Sony camcorder just kind of clipped to my chest and caught a bass and leaned over to get the bass out of the water, and then whoop, half the camera right in the water, and I was like, oh no! But it survived. It was tough. I think it was the right half. Good. Yeah, so I think if it was the battery end, it would have been tough, but it was kind of the lens end, so. It did. There was a little bit of water damage on the LCD screen, I think, or something. But for the most part, also, if you were, I might put that up for sale later. So if you hear that, just totally disregard that's happening. But it still functions.
LCD looks great.
Yeah, totally right. It's normal glare. It's fine.
It's character.
Yeah, exactly. Well, Jess, you are a wealth of information. You've been everywhere, and apparently even more places than probably 5 times as many places as what I already knew before we got on this conversation. So I can't thank you enough for being able to come on here and just kind of tell us really a different perspective on things and things that really help. Can you maybe direct people that might be listening towards like some of the stuff that you do, where you might be working, and where they can find out more just about what Jess is all about?
Absolutely. And I really appreciate, guys. Thanks for having me on. This has been really fun.
Oh, by all means.
My website's just jessmcglothlinmedia.com, and Instagram is jess_McGlothlin_media. Not too creative there. But, definitely feel free. Like, I'm always game to talk about gear. Like I said before I did this, I sold gear in outdoor stores. So I geek out on the gear side and always love chatting with people via email or Instagram messages or whatnot. So, anyone, please reach out, and I'm happy to chat.
Yeah, cool. And it sounds like that a lot of different people could learn from some stuff from you, because you just about done everything, Jess. Like, what have you not gone and done that you want to go do?
I feel like it's a super long list. I feel like I'm just at the beginning of this.
That's cool.
That's good.
No, there's some good stuff. I got into photography eventually, actually, or originally to do conflict photography, like go cover war. And I'm actually getting back into that a bit this fall, doing some conflict photography and some training there. So I think I'll always have my roots in outdoor photography. I'm enjoying learning the hunting side, but
yeah.
I feel like I'm at the very beginning. There's a lot of good stuff out there yet to be done.
Yeah, for sure. Well, that's awesome. I can't wait to see more of what you put together, girl. It's pretty awesome stuff you got going. And I don't know what yet, but we're going to have you back on the show sometime because you're a great guest. And thank you so much for being willing to answer all of our silly questions and laugh along with us. So, anyways.
You guys made it fun.
Good. We try to. Man, it can get... I don't know. When you do this podcast thing a lot, sometimes you can lose your edge, especially when you're trying to be like the I don't know, not the talent. What's the right word I'm looking for? Just like the
host.
Yeah, the host, right? And whenever you have good guests who give good answers, it makes it so much better. And man, this was great, Jess. So thank you so much.
Hey, thank you. I really appreciate it. And let's hit the water or hit the mountains one.
Yeah. All right, we will. We will be sure and do that, girl. Just give us a holler. We will be sure and link to all of your stuff that you mentioned earlier in the notes below so that people can check out what you got going on. So, all right.
Awesome.
Well, stay warm up there.
I will try. Thanks, guys.
You're welcome. See ya.
See ya.
Man, that was some killer info. If you found this interview helpful, be sure and leave us a review below and comment what you thought was the most helpful tip from this episode.
For sure. Make sure you also follow us on our social media platforms, Facebook and Instagram, and also subscribe on YouTube so you can see how these hunts turn out.
Remember, this is your element.
Live in it. Been waiting my whole life for that.